Hi, I'm Cy Kellett from Catholic Answers Live. Recently, Todd Agliolaro, Director of Publishing here at Catholic Answers, and I got to sit down with the two gentlemen who are the showrunners for the big giant series from Amazon set in Tolkien's Middle-earth in the Second Age. The series is Rings of Power. As any person of faith who reads Tolkien's work probably knows, the themes that run through it are familiar Christian themes. There's a familiar Christian spirit undergirding the whole thing. Well, how important was that to the people who put together the show, and how did they go about trying to be faithful to those themes? We wanted to ask them, and we got the chance to ask them, and here's that conversation. J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, showrunners for Rings of Power. Thank you very much for taking the time to be here with us this morning. Todd is the guy that you're trying to please. He is a fanatic of Tolkien. So I'm going to let him take the first question. Go ahead, Todd.
I think you hang in there too, Si. All right. Tolkien once called The Lord of the Rings a fundamentally religious and Catholic work. And in some ways, the events of the Second Age, which Rings of Power treats, are even more religious than those of the Third. When you were mapping out your vision for Rings of Power, how did you and your team first familiarize yourselves with the implicit religiosity of Tolkien's universe? And then what are some of the concrete ways that you've tried to represent that in the series so far?
Do you want to, JD? Or yeah.
Well, I'd say one of the things we do, there's a lot of work that goes into approaching a project like this. One of them, I just happen to have it on my desk right now, literally is reading Tolkien's biography by Humphrey Carpenter. You really get a sense for his life and his faith journey and his academic journey and sort of all the different influences in his life that led him to writing The Lord of the Rings. And so really seeking to understand those influences, understand sort of what strains you're breeding together to make a world as rich as Middle-earth is. So those are things that are very important to us to seek to understand, just coming at it from a background, and then immersing ourselves in Middle-earth and trying to understand it from as many different points of views as we could. Both faith and religiosity is a part of that. In addition to Tolkien's love for linguistics and etymology, so there's just and then there's also his love for Northern European mythology and literature that you see influencing the work. So we try to understand all those influences.
I would love to expand on it just for just a second. I think in some ways our read on Tolkien's mythology, the books take place in the Third Age. And in some ways, we talk about that Third Age as almost post-apocalyptic. All the great kingdoms have fallen. And the Second Age then is about the fall. And, I think the show is aiming to go deep into the tragic story of how potentially great kingdoms fall to temptation and to evil. And I think as you explore those themes, you're going really deep into the core of Tolkien's values and, spiritual journey. And we hope that people who watch the show feel that, in every scene and in every storyline, in a way that is hopefully artfully rendered and subtle. Tolkien also never wants it to be an allegory. So we're trying to protect that as well. But those themes of good and evil and how good turned to evil is the core of what the entire show's about.
Yeah, I guess I'll follow up the religious question with, you have the faithful in Numenor, and they're the religious people. And I have to tell you, as Christian people ourselves, we're kind of get used to, if you have a group called the faithful and they're religious, they're going to be mass murderers. They're going to be weirdos or creeps. And you didn't do that. You take a non-ironic, non-destructive view of religion. Does that feel uncomfortable to have religious people be the good guys? Is that an intentional thing? How did you come at that?
No, I think it's just a part of the fabric of the world. I mean, and I would say it's not just in Numenor. I think there's some very earnestly portrayed, faith and belief in the dwarf world in particular as well. There's ritual and there is a sense of the sanctity of the mountain, and they talk about their particular deity all the time. And I hope you feel it there too. And I think some of that is just crafting a world that feels as richly layered and has roots in the specific values of those cultures in a way that's true to how Tolkien did it. Sorry, JD, did you want to add something to that?
For sure, yeah. And Tolkien didn't have one-dimensional characters. We were never going to create a one-dimensional character. Also, some of us are people of faith ourselves. I'm an active church-going Christian, go to church every Sunday. I'm in the bishopric of my congregation, similarly, also, sort of like as soon as I see a religious person on screen, we'll often be like, okay, here we go. Sort of just gird yourself because they're going to end up being, either a fundamentalist or some kind of weirdo, or, also there's this weird plastic kind of like quality you sometimes get with people trying to talk about, following their faith, that sometimes I'm like, I know tons of religious people who are able to interact with normal people in a very normal way every single day. Why do we never see them on screen? So I think we wanted to just show people who are out in the world doing their thing, trying to live the best life they can, who also happen to believe in a higher power.
But I want just one more thing on that. And that's also not because we're trying to bring our personal faith and values into the show, but because those are Tolkien's values. And that's what we want the show to honor and hopefully breathe life anew into.
We were both impressed, I think, with what you did with the Elven rings. That they're not just like Harry Potter level magic. There's something else. There's light. There's life. There's healing. So the rings of power, in your view, what is the power that's in these Elven rings? What is it?
So there's three that are described, by Tolkien. He talks about making, healing, and preserving all things unstained. So they're a little esoteric. They're not Captain Planet, where they each have certain things, or they're not X-Men, where right. One of them can shoot lasers out of his eyes or whatever. But the idea of healing is a thing that we think can be both physical and spiritual and emotional, and so we play with sort of each of those things with the healing, making in terms of inspiration, and then preserving all things unstained is powers we'll, I think, start to play with a little bit more as you move forward in the series.
You're also seeing how the rings are preserving the elven vitality and their kingdom, represented by that tree, which is ultimately a symbol of what Tolkien said that these elven rings in particular did, was preserve their world and sort of prevent the decay of time. And all of that is quite esoteric, and it's always a balancing act, but we want to be true to that. We wanted to try to, as wherever possible, be true to Tolkien's soft magic. Sometimes you don't really know the boundaries of the rules of the magic. It's always a little mysterious to you. And that's challenging as dramatists and sometimes challenging for audiences, but we really try to be true to that.
In the Rings of Power, you have a challenge of compressing hundreds and even thousands of years of history, sometimes into and also thousands of miles of space into much smaller spaces and times, because it's television, right? And so, how did you approach? Do you have any rules that you set out for yourselves when you were, for example, overlapping generations of characters, or compressing the space so that things can happen?
We're always trying to stay true to the spirit of a story, even if the letter of the law, in terms of how long things take, maybe we'll fudge. Sorry, JD, what were you going to say?
I was going to say we are much more willing to fudge time than space, and this was a principle we came up with the estate really from day one. As we talked to them about it, we agreed that if you were to be strictly true to the letter of the law in terms of time, you would have mortal characters constantly dying off as the events of the Second Age were going on, and if you wanted a long form 50-hour epic, you need time to invest in these mortal characters. You couldn't just do one pocket of elf story and then hand in all your human character cards and get a whole new hand for season 2 and a whole new hand for season 3. So we agreed that we could do some overlapping in terms of the timeline. Space we try to be more rigorous with. In that's a really important thing for Tolkien. Travel time, journeying. You don't want to just feel like characters can just sort of teleport and fly across the map. So we really try to look at our overlapping stories and say, okay, how many days have passed here in this storyline? How long would it take? How many miles is it to get from this place to this place? Do they have horses? Okay. Do they have eagles? Okay. And they really sort of look at all these different things of how fast could they reasonably go in a certain amount of time. So that's stuff that we try to be pretty rigorous about.
As Catholics, there's the world we see, and then there's the reality behind it. One of my favorite scenes, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but an elf actually sees behind the veil and sees that Sauron is not a sympathetic character, is not even a conflicted character, is purely grossly evil and even dead smelling.
Fiery.
Can you talk a little bit about the I guess for us that would be called sacramental. I don't know how you would refer to it, but that the world behind the world. You took the time to depict that.
So I feel, very much this connects to Tolkien's beliefs. If I'm analyzing it from a biographical, where's he drawing on? But within the bounds of what he called the secondary world, his imagined world itself, there are two realities existing at all times. One is a physical reality, one is a spiritual reality. He calls it the unseen world. And some of the rings give you the power to move between those worlds. But throughout his books, people are perceiving things that are not there in a physical sense, they're there in a spiritual sense. And elves, I think in particular, have the ability to perceive those things. JD, am I talking artfully enough about this?
Yes, absolutely, and you see it, throughout Tolkien's works. I mean, Sam sees it at a certain point when he sees, Gollum, in this sort of like how he would appear with spiritual eyes as opposed to just how he looks, in the physical world. And that's something that you see sort of throughout Tolkien. So we wanted to be able to. I mean, Tolkien is filled with both that and then visions, that seem to come from other worlds also, and so we want characters to have these type of experiences.
We want to risk the show having, a toe in the transcendent and beyond the mortal and physical, and we try to do that in a lot of different ways. Hopefully, always being, respectful and reverent to the way he depicted it.
Well, thank you.
The transcendent.
You've been very kind to take the time with us. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks much.